We're supposed to wash our hands frequently with soap and water, or even use hand sanitizer. It keeps us healthy, right? Sure, but it's tough on the hands. It leaves them dry and cracked. And in this video, we'll find out why. So oil and water, pretty different, even chemically. And I don't mean to scare you with all these chemical diagrams up here, but looking at this, you can clearly see that this diagram of even a small oil molecule is really different than the tiny water molecule. And that carries over into their physical properties as well. I mean, think about this French fry bag from the other day. See those grease stains? I mean, they could be a day old or a month old. They'll still be there because the oils don't dry out. So if that bag got wet with water, it would dry out. But these don't dry out, which is part of why it helps moisturize your skin. And when the soap, which we'll get to later, carries it away, now your skin dries out. Oils have some other interesting properties as well. Besides not drying out, they're fairly viscous or thick, right? Like this oil and vinegar. You might be able to see that oil just flows differently. It's thicker, more viscous. And as it cools down, it gets even thicker and thicker. That's one of the properties. Unlike water. I mean, eventually water freezes, but water at any temperature isn't really all that different. And the big application for us in biology is that, kind of like this oil and vinegar, they don't mix. Let's take a little closer view of this. See that there? That oil layer on the top and all that stuff in the bottom. They're not wanting to mix. Now I can get them to mix, make sure that's on good. I shake it up the way you do before you put it on a salad, and they're all nice and mixed up now, but we know if we let it sit there for a bit, they're just going to separate again. So oil and water don't mix, and that's an important chemical property that goes throughout cellular biology. Along with that is the idea that like dissolves like. So if I had a bottle of water, what could I dissolve in here? Well, anything with similar chemical properties. Salts, sugars, and most other things you would find in your kitchen, right? They all dissolve in water pretty well. Well, what about oil? You know, if I had this oil, what could I dissolve in here? Not a whole lot, really. I mean, there's a few spices that dissolve nicely in oil and a few of the flavor compounds, but not a whole lot else. So, like, back to this grease-stained bag, how would I get those grease stains out, or if you get grease stains in a shirt? Well, you have to use solvents, right? Things like alcohols, paint thinner, gasoline, really harsh stuff. I mean, those dry your hands out too because they carry away the oils. And that brings us back to the hand sanitizer. Its main ingredient is alcohol. Alcohol is funny because it will mix with water and oil, but it does dissolve oil certainly better than water does, and that's why a lot of use of hand sanitizer without lotion really dries out your hands. It carries away the oil. Now this chemistry has application not only for our skin and keeping it from drying out, but also to our cells as well. Right? Our skin's job is to keep the water inside the body and keep it from escaping into the air. At least that's part of its job. The cell's job is to create a separate fluid compartment full of mostly water. And that's surrounded by water, but we need a chemical separation between the inside and out. And that's where the oils come into play. Let's say the blue represents water and the orange particles are substances dissolved in the water. They can move anywhere they want. But if we put a membrane around them, like the red, and that membrane is made out of oil, well, now those substances that are soluble in water can't escape. That's what a cell membrane does. That's the magic of oil and water not mixing. Well, what about soap then? We haven't talked about soap. Soap helps oil and water to get along. And this is partly why it washes that oil off your skins, but it also helps us when we wash dishes, like this. So here we have that greasy pan from this morning's breakfast, and if we put just water in there, we can just see that bead up. Obviously the oil and water are not going to get along. No matter how much water I add, that oil is still there. That's where soap comes into play. So if we add some soap, that's going to help. But one of the things we need to do is to scrub it around a bit, right? That breaks the oil up into small droplets. And if we use a warmer water, then that actually helps it become a little more liquid and break up easier. Now, pretty clean. All that oil breaks up with the soap. And let's look at that in terms of how the chemistry works. Let's say this big black glob in the middle is a big blob of grease. And we want to break it up, and so we scrub, and all those grease particles separate. Now this up here is a soap molecule. And the black end is the part that gets along chemically with the oil, and the red end chemically gets along with water. And so now that these grease particles are separate, then the soap molecules can actually surround them and make them soluble in water, because all of these water-loving parts are facing outward and the water carries it right off. So there you go. That's how soap helps oil and water to get along. Now, this is really the foundation for a lot of important chemistry when it comes to biology, that oil separating two water compartments. And by the way, although it's fine for your hands to get that soap on them and wash them away, all the surface of your hands and the rest of your skin is pretty disposable cells, right? Well, you don't want that soap on the inside, because it will start dissolving your cells. In fact, those insecticidal soaps that you get, or dormant oil spray, most of those are some sort of oil or soap that actually gets into the insect's body and starts dissolving it from the inside out. Pretty gross, but effective. Obvious applications for us: don't eat soap. You probably knew that already. Until next time, keep appreciating life.